It's not the right scheme, not fit for purpose. They're concerned about it. They're right to be concerned about it. And the Scottish Government have asked for their UKIM exemption after they've put their scheme together. If I was building a house, I'd get planning permission, then I'd build my house, not do it the other way around.
Drew Hendry.
Thank you. The Secretary of State knows that the process for gaining an exemption to the Internal Market Act is through developing the appropriate common framework. He also stated that there had been no request by letter from the Scottish Government, yet the Deputy First Minister wrote to the UK Government on the 31st of January and even received a positive reply from his Government on the 10th of February. So is the problem here that the Secretary of State just has a very selective memory, or is it the fact that he's so busy preparing for his seat in the House of Lords that his office don't even bother keeping him in the loop anymore?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, let's be absolutely clear about this. The letter that the Honourable Gentleman refers to was a letter to the Chancellor about VAT treatment of the deposit return scheme. He mentioned that an exemption request would be coming forward in the letter, but the official request was made on the 6th of March. There is no question about that, and the detailed arguments were laid out on the 6th of March at the ministerial meeting.
Chris Law.
Thank you. It's not gone too well for the Secretary of State, is it? Madam Deputy Speaker, environmental charities across these islands have written to the Secretary of State calling for him not to block the Scottish Deposit Return Scheme. Now, as we know, there are successful schemes across many other countries, and the British Soft Drinks Association, whose members include Coca-Cola, and the iron brew maker AG Bar, call for it to go ahead as planned. So what on earth is the future Baron von Jack thinking of when he's ignoring these calls and threatening to block the scheme, particularly when his own government and other UK nations will follow Scotland's lead and introduce their own scheme from 2025?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm not sure there's been much joined-up thinking on the questions here, because this is, again, you're going to hear the deposit return scheme. I have suggested it should be paused. I think a UK-wide solution is right. I think recycling is absolutely right. But I agree with the Chief Executive of Tesco, Britain's largest retailer, when he says this is not the right scheme. It will be inflationary. I have at this dispatch box before said 12 bottles of water, in Scottish water in Aldi, currently cost £1.59. Under this scheme, they will go to £3.99, or even higher if there's a price put on top by the consumer. So £2.40 of that could be reclaimed, but the consumer will also pay a extra cost that is put on the producer. And the producer will be clear about that. And I spoke to Coca-Cola, we met with them. They said it would be 2p on a can, it would be 5p on a bottle passed on to the consumer that they couldn't reclaim, and higher figures from other companies, including one brewer. The last point, Madam Deputy Speaker, but one of those small brewers said to us it would be £1.40 they'd have to add to a bottle of beer, plus the 20p. So it's very inflationary, it's very bad for the consumer's shopping basket, and that is why I think we need to pause and get a scheme that works for the whole United Kingdom.
David Mundell.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and what a pleasure to see you in the chair for Scottish questions. Can I add my congratulations to Humza Yousaf on becoming First Minister of Scotland and recognise the inclusive and historic nature of the appointment. But does my right honourable friend agree with me that, based on the experience of our constituents, he'll have to considerably up his game in his new role, given that as Transport Minister he came to Dumfries in 2016 to hold a transport summit, and 7 years later precisely 0 of the commitments given that day have been delivered?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think he not only did he fail in the transport brief, as we know from his opponent, who took 48% of the vote, almost half the votes, that he also failed in his other briefs on justice and in health.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I join with others in congratulating the new First Minister. However, the Barnett formula, by which money is devolved to Scotland, has existed for more than 40 years. And I wonder if he's received any representations from the Scottish Government as to reviewing that formula.
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, at the moment we are in discussions with the Scottish Government about a review of the financial fiscal framework. That's a review that's been in train for some time, and the conclusions will be coming shortly.
Robert Miller.
Mr Deputy Speaker, and I too congratulate Mr Youssef on his appointment as First Minister in Scotland. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that actually the effectiveness of devolution arrangements was demonstrated in the use of the Scotland Act, and Section 35 in particular, to block the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, specifically because it impacted on the effective operation of UK law across the UK?
Secretary of State.
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker. I mean, I've heard the new First Minister say that it was anti-devolution to block a bill that had been passed by the Scottish Parliament. But Section 35 exists for that very reason. When a bill is passed by the Scottish Parliament, and if they didn't pass it, we couldn't block it. When a bill is passed that has adverse effects on GB-wide legislation, it exists to stop that bill going for royal assent, so those adverse effects can be dealt with.
Shadow Secretary of State Ian Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's great to see you back with us in the chair, and welcome back, particularly to Scottish questions. There's been a seismic victory, an historic victory this week, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Scotland football team last night beat Spain at Hampden, so we send all our congratulations to them. And can I also start by echoing the Secretary of State's congratulations to the new First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf. The Secretary of State rightly challenged him to engage reverse gear on independence, but I think he may have already crashed that car. The new First Minister, of course, inherits a divided party and the SNP's dreadful record on public services, but what he does not inherit is Nicola Sturgeon's mandate. At the Holyrood election, the ballot paper said Nicola Sturgeon for First Minister, not Humza Yousaf. So does the Secretary of State agree with me and Humza Yousaf himself when he rightly called for a UK general election after the Prime Minister changed twice last year? And does he agree that a new First Minister with no mandate means there should not only be a general election now, but a Scottish election now too?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, what I'd say is that there is a precedent for political parties voting in new leaders who then assume office. We had Henry McLeish replaced Donald Dewar, Jack McConnell replaced Henry McLeish, Gordon Brown replaced Tony Blair, even Nicola Sturgeon replaced her, at the time, great friend and mentor, her was not mine, Alex Salmond. So, yes, it would be hypocritical of me to say otherwise, because last year, of course, I defended the change of Prime Ministers, and I think it's hypocritical of Humza Yousaf to suggest that that we should have done it, and now deafening silence.
Ian Murray.
The answer shows that both the Conservative Party and the SNP are both democracy deniers, Madam Deputy Speaker. In January, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK government... Oh, they don't like it, Upham. In January, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK government announced that they had signed a memorandum of understanding with biotech and Moderna to conduct trials into vaccines that can attack cancer cells. These innovative treatments could be a lifeline from those with terminal cancers, like David Williamson from Glasgow, who contacted me and others to plead to be accepted onto those trials. However, because David lives in Scotland, as it stands, these trials are due to take place in England only. He's written to both the UK and Scottish Health Secretaries, but failed to receive a response. David doesn't want to die, knowing that there could be a treatment that could help him. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that potentially life-saving treatment should be available across the UK, and will he work to resolve this matter urgently for David and thousands of others?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, yeah, this is a very serious issue. My sympathies are with David and his family. I know that he has written to the Health Secretary. I'm a great believer that our NHS is reciprocal across the United Kingdom, and I will organise a meeting for the Honourable Member with SOS Secretary of State Steve Barclay at the earliest opportunity.
SNP spokesperson Dr Philippa Whitfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I too welcome you to the Chair on Scottish questions, and would join myself with the comments of the Labour shadow on celebrating Scotland's win. Just a pity that people couldn't watch it on terrestrial Scottish television. I would just point out that devolved governments have led on many innovative policies, such as the carrier bag charge in Wales and the smoking ban and minimum unit pricing of alcohol in Scotland, with the UK government following years later, if at all. The attacks on the policy at the time show that had it existed, the Internal Market Act would inevitably have been used to block minimum unit pricing, which has recently been credited with a 13% drop in alcohol-related deaths in Scotland. Even the EU single market allows policy divergence to improve public health and the environment. So why are there no such derogations in the Internal Market Act?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'd say to the Honourable Lady, I'll pick up her first point, just because we don't want the grievance factory to say that it was the, as I've seen on social media today, it was the English government blocking the Scotland watching the game against. I said in social media the game against Spain last night that we were so victorious in, but because the Scottish Football Association sold the rights to the football match, and it was their decision. On the second point, there are opportunities for derogations within exemptions within the UK internal market, and we did it in the case of plastic cutlery because the same proposal was coming forward in the rest of the UK 6 months after the Scottish Government. The schemes worked together, and a derogation for 6 months worked. But derogations don't work when you have different schemes in different parts of the United Kingdom, some including glass, some not, and you have producers having to sign up to different schemes that have a huge cost implication. We don't think that is the right way to go forward.
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's funny how differences in the different nations worked fine before Brexit. One has to wonder why the UK market doesn't seem able to cope right now. So is he planning to repeatedly hold back the devolved governments to avoid making his government look bad, or is he just going to seek every single chance to attack devolution and enforce Westminster rule?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chief Executive of Tesco, who I've quoted earlier in these questions, who's the largest retailer in the United Kingdom, made the very good point yesterday in the paper that there is one drinks industry across the United Kingdom and we should have one solution to the recycling problem.
Robbie Moore.
Number 2, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Secretary of State.
With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will answer questions 2, 3 and 9 together. My assessment is that the union is strong, as is support for the union. People want to see their government delivering. Oh yes, strong, very, very strong. People want to see their governments delivering, and this is what we're doing, from levelling up to tackling the cost of living and working with the Scottish Government and delivering free ports, investment zones and city and region growth deals.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Opinion polls clearly show that the people of Scotland want the UK and Scottish governments to work together to take Scotland forward rather than going back to the divisions of the past. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the new SNP leader should focus on Scotland's economy, the NHS, schools, creating jobs, rather than going back to another divisive independence referendum?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the answer is that my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I would call on the new First Minister to seize this opportunity to do things differently, and rather than confrontation, let's have collaboration for a change.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm delighted to hear the Secretary of State's assessment. And does he agree growing support for the Union shows people across Scotland are seeing the advantages of working together as we face challenges like the war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis, rather than following the separatist path of division?
Secretary of State.
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, as we've seen with free ports, and we will see with investment zones, as we've seen with city and region growth deals, when we work together, we are truly better together.
Scott Benton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Would my right honourable friend agree that by extending our cost of living support and taking measures to deliver long-term sustainable growth whilst reducing inflation, the Chancellor's budget strengthened the Union by delivering for all parts of it?
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker. The cost of living support has been a total of £94 billion, the package, and that's an average for every household in the United Kingdom of £3,300.
Now go to the chair of the Select Committee, Pete Wishart.
Chair, and it's great to see you in the chair once again. Can I say to the the Secretary of State that the Union's in trouble because there's no longer a case for the Union. And we know that because a significant number of under-50s now support independence. But perhaps he could tell us what the Union's greatest achievement has been in the course of the past few years. Is it a Brexit that Scotland doesn't support? Is it high-rise energy prices in energy-rich Scotland? Or perhaps it's been run by a bunch of Tories that most of Scotland rejected?
Secretary of State.
Well, I noticed the honourable gentleman didn't quote any opinion polls to me this time. Nor when he mentioned Brexit did he call for another referendum, a result that was 52% to 48%.
Order. Now, Scottish questions are very important. There's too much chatting going on. There are subtleties in the questions and the answers that people are missing. Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I was trying to give the very subtle answer that when the Brexit referendum was 52% to 48%, the honourable gentleman wanted another referendum. The result of the leadership election was 52 to 48, and suddenly he's very happy with it. And he loves to quote opinion polls to me. He didn't quote any today. I can't think why. All I would say is the people of Scotland are seeing the strength of this United Kingdom, whether it's through free ports, whether it's through investment zones, whether it's through city and region growth deals. The desire to stay in the United Kingdom gets stronger and stronger.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And yes, it is a delight to see you back, and I hope you did enjoy the football last night and not too hoarse. I would like to also welcome the First Minister and congratulate him on his elevation to the post. But given that 13 of the last 15 opinion polls in Scotland have favoured no over yes, the most recent in the Scotsman put support to independence for only 39%. In a by-election in my constituency in Edinburgh West, council by-election, my own party won 57%, and yes parties could barely get 20%. Given those facts, does the Secretary of State think that the new First Minister should focus on the issues which are important to the people of Scotland? The NHS, education and inflation rather than independence?
Absolutely, Madam Deputy Speaker. And we know from the judgment in November of the UK Supreme Court that the Constitution is entirely reserved to the United Kingdom Government. And therefore, I would ask the Scottish Government, the new Scottish Government, to do the day job, to focus on crime, to focus on drug deaths, to focus on the health service and to focus on education. That's what devolution is about.
Geraint Davis.
Pleasure to see you back. Question 4. Thank you.
Secretary of State. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also start by congratulating the Scotland team in their triumph last night, and also to the new First Minister of Scotland. The United Kingdom Government is responsible for heavy rail infrastructure in Wales. Conversely, this is a devolved responsibility in Scotland, so the Scottish Government receives Barnett-based funding. This is consistent with the funding arrangements for all other policy areas reserved in Wales, but devolved in Scotland.
Geraint Davis.
In other words, Wales has only had 1.5% of rail enhancement investment for the UK for 5% of the population, while Scotland gets 8% for its 8% of the population. And that's why the wages in Wales are something like 73% of UK average compared to 92%. So will you give an undertaking that Wales should get its fair 5% share of HS2, £5 billion, in the same way as Scotland will get its 8%, £8 billion? And will you raise this with his colleagues at Cabinet?
Minister.
The Welsh Government has actually received a significant uplift in its Barnett-based funding due to UK Government spending on HS2. I'd also point out that the UK Government has committed £2 billion for the period 2019 to 2024, more than double the £900 million invested between 2014 and 2019.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's fantastic to see you in the chair for Scotland Questions. Can I echo the comments across the House congratulating the new First Minister on his election? With regard to rail funding, cross-border rail links, like extending the Borders Railway down to Carlisle, are vital to people and businesses in the north of England and Scotland. Would my honourable friend agree that implementation of the Union Connectivity Review recommendations is vital in this regard, and can he give an update on this?
Minister.
Well, I pay tribute to the honourable member for his hard work with the other cross-border MPs, including myself, to deliver the extension of the Borders Railway to Hawick, Newcastleton and on to Carlisle. I was delighted to see the funding for the feasibility study in the Borderlands Growth Deal, and we hope that the work in this study will get underway very, very soon.
Tamarjeet Singh Desai.
Pleasure to see you back in the chair, Madam Deputy Speaker. Congratulations to Hamza Yousaf on becoming the First Minister. And number 5, please, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Scotland Office Ministers have regular discussions with ministerial colleagues regarding the cost of living support. At the recent budget, the Chancellor announced additional support measures for households and families across Scotland and indeed all parts of the United Kingdom. This included maintaining the energy price guarantee until June this year, which is in addition to the previous announced energy bills discount scheme. We've also made changes to universal credit to help people get back to work.
Tamarjeet Singh Desai.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of my Slough constituents are struggling, and likewise in Scotland, where over a quarter of households, 613,000, are struggling to pay their energy bills and are living in fuel poverty. And the situation is likely to worsen with increasing inflation and further potential energy price hikes. So does the Minister accept that the Scottish people deserve much better, and rather than stoking culture wars or more sleeves or obsessing about another independence referendum, we need both the UK and Scottish governments to work together and focus on tackling the continued cost of living crisis?
Madam Deputy Speaker, this government continues to do everything it possibly can to support the most vulnerable in society. Taken together with all the government's efforts to help families and households with higher costs, the total support to an average household is £3,300 over the current year. It is right that the government continues to provide cost of living support while sticking to its plan to avoid added unnecessary inflationary pressures.
Alan Kerr.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's so good to see you back in the chair. Is my honourable friend aware that the deposit return scheme that the Scottish Government plan to introduce later this year will have a significant impact and cost on brewers, pubs and distilleries? Now, whereas we strongly support the objectives of the scheme, does my right honourable friend support the calls that the Scottish Government should rethink the implementation in order to reduce the cost on consumers ultimately?
Minister.
My right honourable friend makes a very important point. The Scottish Government's deposit return scheme does not work, and it's very important we find a solution that works across all parts of the United Kingdom. We should reflect on the comments of Tesco's Chief Executive yesterday, which said that the Scottish Government's deposit return scheme was not fit for purpose, risks driving up prices, and that there should be a UK-wide scheme.
Shadow Minister Liz Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, across Scotland, just like in my constituency, the cost of living crisis continues to make life difficult for so many families. Inflation now at 10.4%, with the British Retail Consortium reporting that food inflation is above 15%. And interest rates have been increased for the 11th consecutive time. Now, the Chancellor's budget was yet another missed opportunity for the government to take the action needed to tackle the cost of living. Does the Minister agree with me that the government should have implemented a proper windfall tax and used the money raised to help struggling families?
Madam Deputy Speaker, no, I do not agree. This government is taking the measures necessary to support households, families and businesses across Scotland and all parts of the United Kingdom. And I think the additional windfall tax that she proposes is not something which we support.
Thank you. That concludes Scottish questions. And before we commence Prime Minister's questions, I'd like to point out, as ever, that live subtitles and a British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings are available to watch on parliamentlive.tv. That's very kind of people to say shh and to be a little bit quiet. I am aware that only those watching the British Sign Language interpretation will be able to hear what I was saying. We now come to questions to the Prime Minister, Sir Bill Wiggin.
Question number 1.
Well, Deputy Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been asked to reply on behalf of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, who is attending the funeral of Baroness Betty Boothroyd. I'm sure the whole House would want to join me in paying tribute to Baroness Boothroyd, the first female Speaker of the House, and our thoughts and prayers are with her family.
I'm sure the whole House does join in sending our thoughts and prayers about Baroness Boothroyd, whom we all held in very high esteem. Sir Bill Wiggin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Phosphates leaching into the River Wye could be stopped by proven phosphate stripping technology attached to anaerobic digesters. But Herefordshire Council's bypass-hating Green and Independent group won't support or engage despite a moratorium on house building. What can he do to save our river and remove the Council from such a vital, strategic and environmental responsibility?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The River Wye obviously is of huge importance to nature. We're taking action to tackle pollution and raise farming standards. He'll know about the Environment Agency's farm inspection capacity and catchment-sensitive farming advice programme, and I defer to his technical knowledge in this area. I'm sure he'll want to make submissions to the local authority.
Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and welcome back into the chair. And can I share the Deputy Prime Minister's words on our Baroness and our thoughts with her family today? And I'm sure the whole House will join me also in paying tribute to Paul O'Grady after his sad death was announced today. He was a national treasure and a true Northern star, and he will be greatly missed. Madam Deputy Speaker, this week the government announced their so-called anti-social behaviour policy. It's only taken 13 years. And look, I'll give him some credit. The Deputy Prime Minister knows firsthand the misery caused by thugs and their intimidating behaviour, lurking with menace, exploding in fits of rage, creating a culture of fear, and maybe even, I don't know, throwing things. So can I ask him, under his new anti-social behaviour, does he think more bullies will be brought to justice?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can reassure the House I've never called anyone scum. But if the Right Honourable Lady is serious about standing up for communities and people who suffer at the scourge of antisocial behaviour, she'd back our plan to deal more swiftly with these issues, to make sure that we ban drugs beyond the conventional ones, give police the powers they need, and if they really want to protect the public, they'll back our plans for parole reform to make sure the murderers, the terrorists, the child killers are not allowed out free to threaten other people, and reintroduce the ministerial veto that side took away.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to see the ministerial code being introduced and adhered to on that side of the House, because it's not just his department where antisocial behaviour is running out of control. It's happening across the country. Police officers disappearing from our streets, replaced by criminals plaguing our towns and leaving people feeling unsafe. The truth is that the Conservatives are missing in action in the fight against crime. So can he tell his constituents and the public why, after 13 years of his party in government, there are now 6,000 fewer neighbourhood police officers on Britain's streets?
Madam Deputy Speaker, she really does have a brass neck, because they voted against our funding of police recruitment and the 20,000 extra police officers. But what I will tell her and the whole House is crime is lower than it was under the last Labour government. Violent crime is halved. Reoffending is 7 percentage points lower. And if she really wants to stand up for the public and the victims of crime. They should back our bill to protect victims and protect the most vulnerable from serious killers, rapists and terrorists.
Madam Deputy Speaker, no one believes that there's more police on the streets and no one feels safer. Neighbourhood policing has gone down and not up. Let's talk about crime. He knows, as well as I do, that neighbourhood police can help prevent antisocial behaviour and knife crime. But trusted local police are also crucial to protecting women. Women feel unsafe on Britain's streets, always looking over our shoulder as we hurry to our front door. So can he tell me, under his watch as Justice Secretary, what is the charge rate for rape?
Can I address all of those elements of that? And first of all say that the issue of rape and serious sexual violence against women is one of our top priorities. She asked what we're doing about it. Since 2019, police referrals of cases are doubled. CPS charges have doubled. She asked on my watch what has happened. The volume of convictions in rape cases increased by 2/3. And if she really wants to protect vulnerable women, whether it's rapists or from rapists or other serious crimes, they will back our parole reforms, which will mean ministers able to prevent them being released onto the public and cause more threats.
He says that rape conviction has gone up. What he really means is that 300 women will be raped today, while he boasts about an increase of 0.5%. He hasn't answered my question, Madam Deputy Speaker, because he's too ashamed of the answer. 1.6% of rapists face being charged for their crime. 1.6%. Let that sink in. A woman goes through the worst experience of her life. She summons up the courage to relive that horrendous experience, to tell the police in detail about her assault. But she only has a 1.6% chance of action being taken. Over 98% of rapists will never see the inside of a courtroom, let alone a prison. And the rest of those brave women, Madam Deputy Speaker, they keep looking over their shoulders and hope the perpetrator doesn't choose tonight to take their revenge for reporting the incident to the police. In the last 13 years of the Tory government, more than 500,000 cases of rape have been recorded by the police. But the charge rate for those attacks have collapsed. He has served under 5 Tory Prime Ministers and had 3 years as Justice Minister. And on his watch, rapists are left to roam the streets. So will he apologise to those victims who will never get justice because of his failures?
I'll first of all say to the Right Honourable Lady, the conviction rate measured by the CPS, the leader of the Labour Party used to be in charge of the CPS, he might want to point this out. Well, actually, the conviction rate has gone up. It is now at 69%. We are doing much more to support the victims of rape when they come forward. Well, they're talking a good game. In fact, we have quadrupled funding for victims since 2010. And if she looks at the latest data, the time it's taken from charge to completion of a rape case has come down by 10 weeks or 70% in the last 3 months alone. She should get her facts straight, particularly when talking about such a sensitive issue.
Madam Deputy Speaker, he won't apologise for the government's failures on charge rates, and 69% of 1.6%. Is that really something to boast about? Let me ask him about an issue which is directly his responsibility. On his watch, rape survivors are waiting on average more than 3 years for their cases to come to court. The honourable member talked about 10-week reduction. 3 years, Deputy Leader. 3 years. So 10 weeks is not anything to boast about. Those 3 years from the day of the assault to the final day of court. Is it any wonder that from April till September last year, 175 trials for rape and other serious sexual offences have had to be dropped because the victim could no longer cope with the delay? So let me ask him, when will he apologise to all those women denied justice because of his failure to sort the court backlog?
Well, she ignores the impact on the court backlog of the pandemic or indeed the CBA strike. But let me tell her what we're doing. We've quadrupled funding for victims since 2010, quadrupled the funding provided by the last Labour government. We launched the 24/7 support line so that when those victims of that appalling crime come forward, they get the support they need. We've increased the number of independent sexual violence advisors to over 1,000, and we're making sure that women that suffer this appalling crime can give pre-recorded evidence in court. We're doing everything that we can, and as I said, the rates are coming down, and we will keep taking action in this area. Is she really? If the Labour Party were really serious about this, they wouldn't have voted against longer sentences for dangerous, violent and sexual offenders in the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, and she would get behind our Victims and Prisoner Bill today.
Madam Deputy Speaker, not a word of apology, no sense of responsibility and not even a shred of shame. The reality is, while people in Britain feel more and more unsafe, he seems to spend all of his time trying to save his own job and none of his time on his actual job. And it's not just me that thinks so. The Prime Minister clearly doesn't trust him to deal with antisocial behaviour because he's given that job to the Levelling Up Secretary. The way things are going, and reports are to be believed, this might be your last PMQs. So let's look at the highlights. A criminal justice on its knees, the largest court backlog on record, rape victims waiting for justice, and through it all he managed to rack up 24 formal complaints from his own civil servants. So can he say today, will he walk before he's pushed?
Madam Deputy Speaker, one thing never changes. She always comes with the usual bluster and political opportunism. Let me tell the Right Honourable Lady what we've been doing, what I've been doing this week. We've delivered new legislation to support the victims of crime, including rape, and to protect the public. We've delivered a plan to stamp out antisocial behaviour, and we've supported families with their energy bills. What's she done? What have the Labour front bench done? They tried to block our small boats bill, and that's the difference between them and us. We deliver for Britain. She likes to play her political games.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is wonderful to see you in your place. As my right honourable friend will be aware, the Thames Freeport was recently given the final go-ahead to become fully operational, creating thousands of jobs and attracting millions in inward investment. Will my right honourable friend join me in congratulating the team behind the bid and encourage businesses and investors from across the South East, indeed across the world, to take a closer look at the fantastic opportunities that exist in Thurrock, and will he work with local education providers to ensure my constituents have the skills needed to take up these fantastic opportunities?
Can I thank my honourable friend? I certainly do support and pay tribute to all of those who have made the new Thames Freeport possible, with its potential to deliver over 12,000 new jobs. I look forward to seeing the local community and the wider communities benefit from the tax benefits, the customs zones, and we'll see how these plans progress. And again, I think it's good news to see the communities in Basildon and Thurrock taking full advantage of the Brexit opportunities.
Deputy Leader of the SNP, Murray Black.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also wish to send my warm regards to the family of Paul O'Grady, the legendary drag queen, for all he's done for my community. I also want to congratulate Humza Yousaf as he becomes First Minister of Scotland. As the first Scots, Asian and Muslim to hold such an office, I'm sure the whole House will send his warm regards. Now, in recent days, video footage has emerged of the former Chancellor and the former chair of the 1922 committee offering their services for £60,000 on top of their MP's salary. The former Health Secretary offered his wisdom for £10,000 a day.
Going once.
Can I ask the Deputy Prime Minister, when he is inevitably booted out of office, what will his going rate be?
Well, can I welcome her to the chamber? The system of declarations is there to ensure transparency and accountability, and of course the Conservatives backed tightening up those rules to make sure that there couldn't be any lobbying. But can I also join with, except to take her up on her tribute to the new First Minister of Scotland. The Prime Minister spoke to him last night. We welcome him to his place, and of course the government want to work constructively with him in the best interest of the people of Scotland.
Murray Black.
During a cost of living crisis, as his colleagues eye up barrels of cash from fake companies, it's the people across these aisles that are being led by donkeys, and they're sitting on those. Now, the former Health Secretary also said that he would impart his wisdom for £1,500 an hour. Most nurses earn little above £15 an hour. Who does the Deputy Prime Minister think is best value for money and for the public?
Well, I'm delighted that the majority of their health unions have accepted the pay settlement. We think that that's absolutely right. And she raises the issue, and of course we've worked with on a cross-party basis to curb the limits on second earnings. I noticed the benches on this side are curiously quiet. Is that because there's 10 shadow cabinet members on their benches who are taking earnings? In particular, the shadow foreign secretary looks like he certainly doesn't want to be under the limelight. He's got earned second earnings from 40 different sources. I don't think they can talk about it. And as far as the Honourable Lady is concerned, we've done everything we can to make sure there's transparency and accountability.
Jack Burton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's very good to see you back in this place. Stoke-on-Trent has been announced as one of the Levelling Up partnerships, and this is on top of the investment we've already received through programmes like the Levelling Up Fund. And this is being delivered thanks to Conservatives working together in government and on the City Council, led by the formidable councillor Abby Brown. So would my right honourable friend agree with me, if people want to continue to see the levelling up of opportunities in Stoke-on-Trent, they should vote Conservative in the local elections in May?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and after years of neglect under Labour, it's now the Conservatives, in no small part thanks to my honourable friend, who have been levelling up in Stoke-on-Trent. £11 million from the Shared Prosperity Fund, £12 million from the Levelling Up Fund, £4 million from the Regional Growth Fund, and that's supporting over 500 jobs and £28 million of private investment. That's the difference for the people of Stoke under a Conservative government.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday, the Secretary of State told us that the Security Service, MI5, have increased the terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland to severe. Responsibility for dealing with terrorism and national security rests with the Government of the United Kingdom, including in Northern Ireland. Will the Deputy Prime Minister assure me and the people of Northern Ireland that the Government will provide the Police Service of Northern Ireland and the Security Service with the resources that they need to counter this serious terrorist threat?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the honourable gentleman? He's absolutely right. Of course, the threat level is kept under constant review. We take into account a range of factors. He'll be very familiar with those. It's disappointing that the threat level has gone up, but I think it is worth also saying that it has been in significant decline in terms of the number of Northern Ireland-related terrorist attacks and attempted attacks since the peak of the violence in 2009-2010. Nonetheless, of course, we will make sure all the resources available to the PSNI and the public are reminded to remain vigilant and report any suspicious behaviour or activity.
James Grundy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my recent local survey as to whether Lee should break away from Wigan Council, I am very pleased to say that so far the survey shows 90% in favour of independence, with only 3% opposed. Please, before you call for a second referendum, let me finish the question. Does my right honourable friend agree that in the 50th year of our campaign for our town's independence, that this is the year to get Lexit done.
My honourable friend campaigns with typical gusto. I think he knows that changing the boundaries at local authority level is subject to an independent process, but I will ensure he gets a meeting with the Minister for Local Government so he can further discuss the aspirations for Lake.
Cat Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Despite Royal Mail posting record profits, management are threatening to put it into administration. Can I ask what conversations government is having with Royal Mail and what it's doing to protect the Universal Postal Service?
Deputy Prime Minister.
It's an incredibly difficult time. Can I thank her for a question? Obviously, the pandemic has had a particular impact, but we're working very closely to make sure we can continue the service, and I'll make sure she gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss her concerns further.
Mark Eastwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On behalf of the people of Dewsbury, I would also like to pay tribute to Dewsbury's greatest daughter, Betty Boothroyd. She was sorely missed. This week I visited Ravenhall School in Dewsbury and Hollybank School in Mirfield. Both do amazing work teaching children with special educational needs and disabilities. However, there is disparity in SEND standards in mainstream schools within my constituency. Would my right honourable friend join me in thanking the teachers and staff at Ravensall and Hollybank for everything they do, and could he also outline how we can ensure all our children are given the best chance in life regardless of which school they go to?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend and pay tribute to the teachers and the staff at both schools, Ravensall and Hollybank, for the amazing work they do. It's a very difficult and challenging job and incredibly important for the life chances of those children affected. He'll know that in March we published the SEND and Alternative Provision Improvement Plan with new national standards, and that's backed up by an increased specialist provision locally with £2.6 billion going into it, and that includes opening 33 new special schools with a further 49 in the pipeline.
Douglas Chapman.
While the Prime Minister is absent, I hope he later gets a chance to watch the BBC dramatisation the Brinksmat robbery, which was held in the 1980s, where the police team assigned to the recovery of this gold only got back half of the gold that was stolen. That sum pales into insignificance compared with the measly 1% from the £1 billion of business grants that was lost to the fraud issued by the Prime Minister under his watch when he was Chancellor. The fingerprints show that this massive fraud now lies at 10 Downing Street. To quote your former fraud minister, Lord Bolton, when will this government get its act together and step up the recovery efforts on behalf of the taxpayer?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, the instance of fraud have become much more complex with the online instance, but he will have noted the massive increase in funding for tackling fraud in the recent budget, and we're confident that will give us the resources we need to tackle this often invisible but very damaging crime.
Sir Robert Neal.
The Deputy Prime Minister will know that stroke is the greatest cause of adult disability in this country and costs our economy some £26 billion, never mind destroying lives. Last year I met Dr John Stevens, who was unable even to sit up unaided after a stroke, but because of emergency thrombectomy procedure is now back at work as a GP in the NHS. Sadly, only 30% of eligible patients actually get thrombectomies. Will the Deputy Prime Minister agree that we need greatly to increase the rollout of thrombectomy procedures, and would he perhaps, in the run-up to World Thrombectomy Day next month, join me in visiting a thrombectomy centre, see at first hand the difference it can make to lives and to getting people back into meaningful and productive work and enjoyment?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend? He's been a dedicated champion for stroke survivors. I know from my own constituency how debilitating that can be and the impact it has on the wider families. NHS England are committed to increasing the delivery of mechanical thrombectomy, including the expansion of local services and local capital investment, and I'm sure we can arrange for a health minister to join him on a visit as he requests.
Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker.
In a shocking article in Surrey Live last year, it was reported that staff at a GP practice in Walton were left in tears and crumbling under pressure due to the increased workload caused by staff shortages. Is it any wonder when there are 850 fewer GPs across the country since 2019? So what does the Deputy Prime Minister say to those patients left in pain and staff left in tears, including in his own constituency, due to this government's failed promise to recruit more GPs?
Well, can I say to her, any abuse against any GP in any practice across the country is absolutely wrong. We have to have zero tolerance of it. What I would just say to her is we've seen a large increase in GP appointments, over 29 million carried out since the start of the year. We're improving access to general practice with more support staff, also the technology, so more state-of-the-art telephone systems. The number of GPs in training is at record levels, and we're investing £1.5 billion to create 50 million more appointments a year by 2024.
If we go a bit faster, we'll get everybody in. Scott Benton.
Since 2019, this government has provided well over £300 million in extra funding for projects in Blackpool. However, there is always room for more. The Bond Street and Weather areas of my constituency are among the most deprived in the country and have been long forgotten by the Labour-led council. The government has already provided £600,000 in funding for a feasibility project with a view to delivering a £30 million regeneration package for these areas. Will the government look closely at the business case to see how this transformational project can be delivered to those communities?
Order, before the Deputy Prime Minister answers that, can everyone else with a prepared question just cut it in half? Just do the question. Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is no one more tenacious in campaigning for Blackpool than the honourable gentleman. I've seen it firsthand when I visited with him. I'm pleased that we delivered with the Levelling Up Secretary the £40 million of funding to relocate the Magistrates' Court and to allow the County Court complex to move. And I know that the Levelling Up Secretary will want to work with him on the regeneration aspirations for the future.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A little girl in my constituency, only 9 years old, developed a bacterial infection just before Christmas, but thereafter very distressing symptoms occurred. OCD, she has intrusive thoughts, she hasn't washed, dressed or properly eaten since Christmas. We believe this to be Pan's Panda, and although health has evolved and I am seeking support for her, part of the lottery and the antipsychotic medication that is often given in this condition, despite the fact that broad-based antibiotics have been proven to work, is because the UK, no part of the UK, has implemented World Health Organisation ICD-11. Will the government commit to looking at this so that other children across the UK don't need to suffer in such a way?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for raising what seems like a very an awful case, and my heart goes out to the family involved. If she'd like to write with me about it, I'll make sure she gets a full answer and a meeting with the Minister if that's required.
Caroline Nooks.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Georgia Harrison is an incredibly brave young woman who only got justice when she was a victim of revenge porn because she could prove that the perpetrator intended to cause her distress. Most victims can't, and perpetrators are using platforms to use revenge porn for financial gain. That's not covered in the legislation. Will my right honourable friend commit to looking at the case studies Georgia has compiled and reviewing this legislation to strengthen it and make it more effective?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady, my honourable friend, my right honourable friend, for all that she's done in this area. I know that there have been a considerable number of changes to the Online Safety Bill, not least because of her forensic attention to detail. They will include the creation of a new base offence of sharing intimate images without consent that don't require proof of an intention to cause distress. And of course the government also supports the Revenge Porn Helpline, which offers free and confidential advice. If there are any further changes that she thinks need to be made, very happy to look at them with her.
Sir Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't know whether the Deputy Prime Minister ever met Lily Savage or has ever spent a night out at the Royal Vauxhall Tavern, but Lily was... I can take him sometime if he wants to go. I think that was a yes, actually, yeah. But Lily was performing at the height of the AIDS crisis in 1987. When police officers raided the pub, arrested her amongst others. They were wearing rubber gloves because supposedly they were protecting themselves from contracting HIV from touching gay men. Lily amazingly said at the time, "Oh, lads, you've come to do the washing up. That's great." Her alter ego, Paul O'Grady, campaigned acerbically and hilariously for elderly people, for care workers, against oppression of every kind. Isn't it time we in this country celebrated our naughty, hilarious drag queens and comics of every kind who inspire us to be a better and more generous nation?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman? I totally agree with him. And Paul Grayson was an incredible comic, but he also... Paul O'Grady. But in terms of Lily Savage also, I think some of that comedy broke glass ceilings and broke boundaries in a way that certainly politicians would struggle to do. So I agree with that. I also think it shows how we need greater, more rambunctious free speech, and we need to avoid the wokery and the limitations on comedy, which I'm afraid both of them would have had no time for.
Dame Caroline Dinage.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to associate myself with the words of the honourable gentleman from Rhondda. Paul O'Grady was a great champion for animal welfare as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, the biggest cause of death for children in this country under the age of 14 is cancer. As she knows, I've been calling for a childhood cancer mission to radically change how we detect, how we treat and how we care for children with cancer. Everything from genome science for detection right the way through to 7-day-a-week play facilities in children's ward. The Health Secretary's been brilliant. He's met with me and has been really positive on this. But will the Deputy Prime Minister restate the government's support for a childhood cancer mission?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend? I certainly will. And the suffering that any child must go through when they get a condition like cancer at such an early age, difficult to believe, and the pressure on the families, incredible. So I thank her for her work. The DHSC will publish a major condition strategy to look at improving outcomes and experience for all cancer patients, but including in particular children. I can't preempt that, but I know it will draw on previous work, including submissions from the various childhood cancer charities. And again, I pay tribute to the work that they do.
Stephanie Peacock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My 6-year-old constituent Daniel has cerebral palsy and mitochondrial disease. He has received palliative care from the Bluebell Wood Children's Hospital, who were forced to temporarily close last year due to staffing pressures. They have ongoing concerns about rising bills. Will the Deputy Prime Minister reassure Daniel's family that he will receive the palliative care he requires as and when he needs it?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank her for raising that very important case that she does? I don't know all the facts of it, but if she writes to me, I'm very happy to look at it. We will make sure the resourcing, but also the care is there. And if, again, as I say, if she writes to me, I'm sure we can arrange for a meeting with the relevant minister.
Wendy Morton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the inclusion of the West Midlands as a hotspot trailblazer police force area in the antisocial behaviour action plan is really good news. Could my right honourable friend outline, though, how communities such as those in my constituency on the periphery of the West Midlands will see and feel the positive difference that this will bring, and that we won't simply see a redirecting of our valuable resources by the Labour Police and Crime Commissioner into other parts of the West Midlands?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend? She raised a really important point. The antisocial behaviour action plan will help us crack down and make sure on antisocial behaviour and make sure that those responsible conduct and undergo repairs within 48 hours, things like cleaning up litter and graffiti. In terms of the West Midlands enhanced hotspot, I'm delighted they'll be getting that additional funding. She's right for the PCCs to determine the precise allocation of funding, but I'm sure she'll make her representations in the usual powerful way.
Mary Glendon.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Announcing her retirement, North Tyneside-born Sarah Hunter MBE played her final game of rugby at the opening Women's Six Nations match at Kingston Park last Saturday. Sarah is the most capped international rugby player in the world, a true professional, great ambassador for her sport and an inspiration to so many. Will the Deputy Prime Minister join with me, the whole of North Tyneside and this House in thanking Sarah for all she has achieved for the country and her beloved sport of rugby?
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Can I thank the honourable lady? She's absolutely right. I pay tribute to the trailblazing record of Sarah. I had the opportunity a few years ago to watch the England female rugby team. I was blown away, and we look forward to her and them going on to bigger and better things.
Richard Fuller.
Madam Deputy Speaker, shush. Will the government require that the East West Rail Company publish a full business case before the allocation of any more taxpayers' money to the project?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you. It's a hugely important project with all sorts of opportunities, jobs, education, and a projected increase in economic output by over 100 billion by 2050. He's right that it needs all the transparency and scrutiny. I know that the first stage of the project is already in construction, on time and under budget. I'm told that the subsequent stages will go through full scrutiny as part of the planning process in a transparent way.
David Linden.
The Prime Minister has previously been on camera as saying that he didn't have any working class friends. When he's not taking his luxury helicopter rides and splashing about in his private pool, where might the Deputy Prime Minister recommend that he might befriend somebody from the working class?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I'm not sure I got the full extent of the question, but the reality is we're doing, and you can see that with the energy price guarantee, the free childcare and the national living wage, that we are supporting everyone in this country, particularly those on the lowest paid jobs.
And the final question, Alicia Cairns.
This week, Rutlander Andrew Osborne solo sailed 3,000 miles, taking 78 days across the Atlantic Ocean. He raised £142,000 for cardiac risk in the young after his daughter Amy died in her sleep, aged 25, being discovered by her sister the next morning. 1 in 12 children die every week of undiagnosed heart conditions. So can my right honourable friend please reassure me what we are doing to increase the diagnosis of undiagnosed heart conditions in children and young people?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for raising this, and our heartfelt condolences go to the family of Amy, but likewise our congratulations go to Andrew on an incredible feat. The fact that 12 young people die every week from an undiagnosed heart condition is something we all want to see an end to. There's more resource going in, there's more research going in, and I'll arrange for a meeting between her and the relevant minister.
Thank you. We will shortly move to the statement, but I will pause briefly to allow a change of cast. So we proceed to the statement by the Minister of State for Immigration, Robert Jenrick.
Well, with permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to make a statement on illegal migration. 3 months ago, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, set out a comprehensive plan to tackle illegal migration. We said we would act, and we have. We've increased immigration enforcement visits to their highest levels in recent years. Since December, more than 3,500 enforcement visits have been carried out, and more than 4,000 people with no right to be here have been removed. Anglo-French cooperation is now closer than ever before and will be deepened because of the deal struck by the Prime Minister earlier this month. We've expanded our partnership with Rwanda to include the relocation of all those who pass through safe countries to make illegal and dangerous journeys to the United Kingdom. Our modern slavery reforms, introduced as part of the Nationality and Borders Act to prevent those who seek to abuse our generosity from doing so, are bearing fruit. We're tackling the backlog with our asylum system by cutting unnecessary paperwork and simplifying country guidance. As a result, productivity has increased, and we are on track to process the backlog of initial asylum decisions by the end of the year. Madam Deputy Speaker, we must ensure our laws enable us to deal with the global migration crisis, which is why we have brought forward the Illegal Migration Bill. The bill goes further than any previous immigration legislation to fix the problem of small boats. whilst remaining within the boundaries of our treaty obligations. And of course, as we reform the asylum system, we will continue to honour our country-specific and global safe and legal commitments. But we cannot and will not stop here, Madam Deputy Speaker, because illegal migration continues to impact the British public in their day-to-day lives. The sheer number of small boats have overwhelmed our asylum system and forced the government to place asylum seekers in hotels. These hotels take valuable assets from communities and place pressures on local public services. Seaside towns have lost tourist trade, weddings have been cancelled, and local councils have had their resources diverted to manage them. And the hard-working British taxpayer has been left to foot the eye-watering £2.3 billion a year bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, we must not elevate the well-being of illegal migrants above those of the British people. It is in their interests that we are sent here. The enduring solution to stop the boats is to take the actions outlined in our bill. But in the meantime, it is right that we act to correct the injustice of the current situation. I have heard time and again of councils up and down the country struggling to accommodate arrivals. This is no easy task. The government recognises that placing asylum seekers into local areas comes at a cost. And so central government will now provide further financial support. Today we're announcing a new funding package which includes generous additional per-bed payments and continuation of the funding for every new dispersal bed available. We will also pilot an additional incentive payment where those properties are made available faster. But faced with the scale of the challenge, we must fundamentally alter our posture towards those who seek to enter our country illegally. This government remains committed to meeting our legal obligations to those who would otherwise be destitute. But we're not prepared to go further. Accommodation for migrants should meet their essential living needs and nothing more, because we cannot risk becoming a magnet for the millions of people who are displaced and seeking better economic prospects. Many of our European partners are struggling with the same issue. Belgium, Ireland, Germany and France are having to take similar steps, and the UK must adapt to this changing context. I've said before that we have to suffuse our entire system with deterrence, and this must include how we house illegal migrants. So today the government is announcing the first tranche of sites we will set up to provide basic accommodation at scale. The government will use military sites being disposed of in Essex and Lincolnshire and a separate site in East Sussex. These will be scaled up over the coming months and will collectively provide accommodation to several thousand asylum seekers through repurposed barrack blocks and porter cabins. In addition, my right honourable friend the Prime Minister is showing leadership on this issue by bringing forward proposals to provide accommodation at Catterick Garrison Barracks in his constituency. And we're continuing to explore the possibility of accommodating migrants in vessels, as they are in Scotland and in the Netherlands. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to be clear. These sites on their own will not end the use of hotels overnight. But alongside local dispersal and other forms of accommodation, which we will bring forward in due course, they will relieve pressure on our communities, and they will manage asylum seekers in a more appropriate and cost-effective way. Of course, we recognise the concerns of local residents, and we're acutely aware of the need to minimise the impact of these sites on communities. Basic healthcare will be available, around-the-clock security will be provided on site, and our providers will work closely with local police and other partners. Funding will be provided to local authorities in which these sites are located. Madam Deputy Speaker, these sites are undoubtedly in the national interest. We have to deliver them if we're to stop the use of hotels. We have to deliver them to save the British public from spending eye-watering amounts accommodating illegal migrants. And we have to deliver them to prevent a pull factor for economic migrants on the continent taking hold. Madam Deputy Speaker, inaction is not an option. The British people rightly want us to tackle illegal migration. As I've set out today, we are doing exactly that, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, today's statement is an admission of failure. Maybe that's why the Home Secretary has asked the Immigration Minister to make it instead. 4 years ago, the Cabinet said they would halve channel crossings. They've gone up 20-fold since then. A year ago, they said they'd end hotel use. They've opened more than ever. They keep making new announcements, but it just keeps getting worse. And people want to see strong border security and properly managed asylum and refugee systems so that the UK does its bit to help those fleeing persecution and conflict alongside other countries. But we have got neither of those at the moment. There's no point in blaming everyone else because they are in charge. The asylum system is broken because they broke it. They have let criminal gangs rip along the channel. People smuggler convictions have halved in the last 4 years, even though more boats and more gangs have been crossing. And yet Tory MPs yesterday voted against Labour's plan for cross-border police units to go after the gangs. They've let asylum decision-making collapse. We've had a big increase in staff, but 40% fewer cases being decided. So they failed to take basic decisions, and they're still not doing Labour's plan to fast-track last year's arrivals from Albania and other safe countries. And as for today's announcements, Madam Deputy Speaker, we need to end costly and inappropriate hotel use, but these plans don't do that. The ministers had to admit, contrary to all of the briefing in the papers this morning, they won't end hotel use. Instead, these sites are additional, and ministers should have been finding cheaper sites and properly managing costs years ago. Today's damning report from the government's own independent watchdog, which strangely the minister did not mention today, says there's been no cost control, that the Home Office contracts are highly inefficient, no cross-government transparency and oversight, officials didn't have financial information on the contracts they were signing, didn't compare costs, and most ludicrously of all, and I quote, different parts of the Home Office operating different schemes at times found themselves competing for the same hotel contracts, driving prices up. Totally chaotic. Basically, they've written a whole load of cheques in a panic. If they had put that money into clearing the backlog instead, we wouldn't be in this mess now. And they should have been working with councils to do this, but they didn't. Yesterday, Tory MPs again voted against Labour's plans for a legal requirement for councils to be consulted. Instead, he has Conservative councils backed by Conservative MPs taking action against him. So can he confirm that the Foreign Secretary is backing legal action against the Home Secretary? Frankly, that is a first even for this chaotic government. And the bill makes things worse. No return agreements with France or Europe. The Prime Minister has just said the Home Secretary was wrong. The Rwanda flights won't start this summer. They've nowhere to send people to, and instead of speeding up asylum decisions, they're just going to cancel them. So that means more people in asylum, accommodation and hotels, and more flim-flam headlines that just don't stack up. Today it was barges, and it turns out there aren't any. Desperate to distract everyone from the damage they might want to do to the dambusters' heritage, instead they start talking about ferries and barges. 3 years ago they said the same thing. Last summer the Prime Minister said it would be cruise liners. The Home Office civil servant said ferries would end up costing more than the hotels they're already spending so much money on. So instead, the Immigration Minister has been sent round the country with a copy of Waterways Weekly trying to find barges instead, and he still hasn't found any. So can he tell us, are these sites then going to be additional, not instead of hotel use? Will he still be using more hotels or less for asylum seekers in 6 months' time? Of the 45,000 people, the boat arrivals last year, can he confirm that more than 90% of decisions have not been taken because the backlog is still their failure? And will he apologise for their failure on cost control? They failed to support Labour's plan to go after the gangs, get a new agreement with France and to fast-track decisions and returns. They are flailing around in a panic, chasing headlines, barges, oil rigs, Rwanda flights, even wave machines, instead of doing the hard graft. They have lost control of our border security, lost control of the asylum system, lost control of their budget and lost control of themselves. Will he answer my questions and will he get a grip?
Well, isn't it abundantly clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that Labour don't have the faintest clue how to tackle this issue? They have absolutely no plan. What we've laid out today is 3 months of intense work, which is seeing the backlog coming down, productivity rising, more sustainable forms of accommodation, a harder approach to make it difficult to live and work in the UK illegally, illegal working raids and visits rising by 50%, greater control over the Channel, all improvements as a result of the 10-point plan that my right honourable friends, the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, set out. The right honourable lady looks back to a mythical time when Labour were last in office, when the Home Office, by their own Home Secretary, was deemed to be not fit for purpose. They call for more safe and legal routes, even though we are second only to Sweden in Europe for resettlement schemes. They call for more money for law enforcement, although we've doubled the funding of the National Crime Agency, and our people are out there upstream tackling organised immigration criminals every day of the week. And isn't it extraordinary that the Home Secretary can't bring herself to the Shadow Home Secretary can't bring herself to condemn those illegal immigrants who are breaking into our country in flagrant breach of our laws. That is weak. That is weak. The truth is that the Labour Party are too weak to take the kind of tough decisions that we are taking today. And in their weakness, they would make the United Kingdom a magnet. There will be open doors, an open chequebook, and there will be open season for abuse. The British public know that the Conservative Party understand their legitimate concerns. We don't sneer at people for wanting basic border controls. We're taking the tough decisions. We will stop the boats. We will secure the borders.
Sir Edward Lee.
Although the Minister did not mention RAF Scampton by name, we assume that that is the base in Lincolnshire he is referring to. I can inform him that the moment this is confirmed, the local authority of West Lindsey will issue an immediate judicial review and injunction against this thoroughly bad decision, which is not based on good governance, but the politics of trying to do something. How can he guarantee that we will not lose £300 million worth of regeneration already agreed and signed between West Lindsey and Scampton Holdings? How will he preserve the listed buildings, the Heritage Centre? How will he preserve this heritage of the Dam Busters and of the Red Arrows? How can he guarantee there's not contamination from the fuel bay of the Red Arrows? How will he protect the safety of 1,000 people living right next door to 1,500 migrants and a primary school? He can't guarantee anything. Will he work with West Lindsey now and Lincolnshire to try and find an alternative site? We are prepared to do it, but we do not want to lose £300 million of regeneration. Lincolnshire will fight, and Lincolnshire will be proved right.
Well, I can only pay tribute, Madam Deputy Speaker, to my right honourable friend and my friend and constituency neighbour. He is representing his constituents forcefully in the way he's always done in this place, and he's absolutely right to do so. I can say to him that whilst this policy is without question in the national interest, we understand the impact and the concern that there will be within local communities, and all parts of government want to work closely with him, with his local authorities, to mitigate the issues that will arise as a result of this site. I can say to him that there will be a significant package of support for his constituents. There will be specific protections for the unique heritage on the site. We don't intend to make any use of the historic buildings, and indeed in our temporary use of the site to ensure that those heritage assets are in fact enhanced and preserved. We do see this as a short-term arrangement, and we would like to enter into an agreement, as he knows, with West Lindsey District Council so that they can take possession of the site at a later date, and their regeneration plans, which are extremely important for Lincolnshire and the East Midlands more generally, can be realised in due course.
Alison Tunis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, Britain has historical form in the use of internment camps, and it is despicable that this government is intent on bringing them back in 2023. His pathetic attempt to draw comparisons between the use of cruise ships to accommodate Ukrainians is as offensive as it is misleading. And in fact, yesterday, the Ukrainian Speaker, Ruslan Stefanchuk, thanked Scotland for saving the lives of his fellow citizens. Scotland is in fact standing down that emergency humanitarian response. Glasgow has closed and Edinburgh has an end date in sight. And furthermore, for those cruise ships, the Scottish Government provided wraparound support with local government, NHS, schools and community integration. His plan is a prison ship designed as a deterrent. Alex Wickham from Bloomberg reports that the Home Office rejected a similar plan last year, as it would be even more expensive than the eye-wateringly expensive hotels plan, costing hundreds of thousands of pounds per hour. What has changed since that advice last year?
Headlines.
Private providers are making a fortune out of this. He is now spending, scandalously, 1/3 of the UK's international aid budget on domestic asylum costs. So what impact has this raid on crucial aid had on the push factors bringing people to these shores? When this idea was previously proposed last year, ministers were also advised that security would be a nightmare, the project would be expensive and it would amount to arbitrary detention, a breach of the UN Refugee Convention. So what has changed than this advice was given last year? Does he understand that housing unaccompanied minors or traumatised people who have fled a war zone and military-style accommodation considered unfit for the MOD would be gravely inappropriate, and would give assurances that such individuals would be exempt from such measures? Madam Deputy Speaker, the real problem here is the backlog. We all know that, and the Home Office's inability to tackle it. He knows that I've got constituents waiting 6 months, 10 months, 14 months, 18 months, 20 months and more for a decision from the Home Office. When will we stop wasting money on headlines and instead tackle the real crisis and fix the backlog?
Well done.
Well, on her first, or one of her questions regarding the use of overseas development aid to pay for the accommodation of asylum seekers here in the UK, we entirely agree with her. I think it is a gross waste of taxpayers' money, and we want to see that money being put to better usage. And that's exactly why we need to stop the boats, so that the finite resources of the United Kingdom can be applied either to resettlement schemes, where we bring people from places of grave danger, like conflict zones, directly, or that we use our resources to support people in some of the most hard-pressed places in the world. That is obviously the best and moral way forward, rather than open borders for predominantly young men in a place of safety in France. With respect to vessels, as I said in my statement, we do see merits in using them. They have been used successfully in Scotland. It's surprising that the SNP seek to denigrate one of their own policies. They don't have very many successful policies, so when they have one, you'd think that they would want to, particularly when it comes to ferries, let's be honest, the SNP are on shaky ground. With respect to families, we don't intend to put minors or families on these sites, but they are the right way forward for single adult males. With respect to the backlog, we are making significant progress. And, well, we are actually. The Honourable Lady doesn't like to deal in facts, as we know. But I can give her our internal unpublished as yet figures, which are that over 11,000 cases in the backlog have been processed in the last 3 months as a result of the new processes we've put in place. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the broader point, as we all know with the SNP, is that they have become sort of humanitarian NIMBYs. She takes the kind of St. Augustine approach. Lord, let us welcome refugees, but not in our constituencies. She would have more credibility if she stood up and welcomed refugees and matched her fine words with good deeds.
No. We will just calm down before we go any further. Thank you. I expect better from over there. Priti Patel.
Deputy Speaker. If I may respectfully make a few points to my right honourable friend, the Minister, I think actually we need to tackle this entire debate and discussion with a degree of maturity, actually. This is a very, very difficult and sensitive subject. And if I may, the points that I would like to make very much refer to previous policy, new plan for immigration, Greek-style reception centres. Had we have had those in place, I think the Minister would recognise this, we would not be in this current situation. I would just like to ask the Minister, though, very specifically, I am an Essex MP and I'm the other MP for Braintree District. Weathersfield is not in my constituency, it's in the constituency of my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary. It is no different, if I may say so, in terms of the rurality and the village size, to a former site, not in Essex, which was Linton on Ouse, which was cancelled by the current government. Can I ask why it is deemed appropriate for asylum seeker accommodation to be placed in a rural village in Essex with single men, where there's no infrastructure, no amenities, but it was not appropriate for someone like Linton on Ouse?
Well, firstly, could I pay tribute to my right honourable friend, who began this good work with her new plan for immigration, which was an incredibly important step forward, and amongst other points, that recognised that it is absolutely critical that when individuals cross the Channel illegally, they are moved either to detained accommodation, which we want to bring forward as a result of our bill, or, in the absence of that, to specific sites where they can be housed appropriately, where their cases can be processed swiftly, and where they have minimal impact on broader society. I know that she pursued a very similar prospect in North Yorkshire, and she will have sympathy for the work that we've done in recent months to take forward similar proposals. I can say that we don't have a current plan to proceed with the Linton on Ouse proposition, but the sites that I've announced today are just the first set that we'd like to take forward, because we want to remove people from hotels as quickly as possible and to move to this more rudimentary form of accommodation, which will reduce pull factors to the UK and defend the interests of the taxpayer.
Alistair Carmichael.
Deputy Speaker, I think the House should be more generous to the Minister. We should acknowledge the true genius of this announcement. Only this Home Office team could think that the answer to the problem of growing numbers of people in small boats was to take them all together and put them into one big boat. Armando Iannucci himself couldn't improve on that. But if the Minister is confident in his projections about what is going to happen to the backlog of asylum applications, why is this extra capacity going to be necessary?
Well, to answer the second point first, what we want to see is anyone crossing the Channel moves into this kind of rudimentary accommodation immediately, and so it's absolutely critical that we build national capacity so that we can clear the hotels, consign that policy to the history books, and then people are put into these large sites. That's why we need them. I have affection for the right honourable gentleman, but I'm afraid he is being naive in this regard, because I am speaking every day, as is the Home Secretary, to our Northern European counterparts in Ireland, in Belgium, in Denmark, in France. They are all pursuing options like this because there is a European migration crisis. We have to ensure that the UK is not a magnet for those individuals who are either economic migrants or are essentially asylum shoppers. I will not allow the UK to be a soft touch.
Conor Burns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The determination of the government to accelerate the processing of claims is to be welcomed. My right honourable friend, I think, would agree that it is unacceptable, wrong and immoral that people have their lives on hold, unable to make a new future for themselves or indeed to be returned to their countries of origin. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have a number of hotels in my Bournemouth West constituency full of such people who are constantly in touch with my hard-working casework team who want their cases resolved. So too, I say to my right honourable friend, do those involved in the hospitality and leisure sector in Bournemouth, on which our economy depend, and local residents who want to see those hotels brought back into the purpose of serving our thriving hospitality sector in Bournemouth. Can my right honourable friend give me the assurance that the proposals he is announcing today will bring into sight the day when those hotels will be returned to that purpose?
Well, my right honourable friend raises exactly the concerns that have motivated us to bring forward these proposals. We want to ensure that the interests of his constituency and constituents are put above those of illegal immigrants coming into our country. This is the necessary first step to build national capacity in these new forms of accommodation so that we can begin to close the hotels and move forwards.
Sir George Harth.
Can I thank the right honourable gentleman for the discussions he held recently with the leader, chief executive and myself of Knowsley Council to discuss the problem we have with a hotel in my constituency. He is aware that, in my view, the use of hotels is not fair on the taxpayer, it's not fair on local communities, and nor is it suitable for the refugees themselves. Will he, though, give me some indication of what criteria will be used to determine which hotels close and in what sequence?
Well, the conversations that I had with the right honourable gentleman and his local authority leaders informed the decisions that we've taken, because it was very clear from his constituency that that hotel was inflaming community tensions, that many people thought it was wrong that illegal migrants were being housed in a much regarded facility that was a hotel that was used for weddings and social events, and that we need to bring that to a close. When we have the capacity to begin closing hotels at pace, I think we'll do so through a number of lenses, obviously closing the most egregious cases first, where the cost to local communities is highest. Also those were in locations which were clearly unsuitable to begin with, such as seaside towns and so on. And then also those where the contracts are coming to an end and we wouldn't want to renew them for value for money purposes.
Richard Drax.
Deputy Speaker, land-based reception camps in the right place has to be the solution. Does my honourable friend agree with me that if you look at what happened in hotels so far with illegal migrants, we've had all kinds of issues with local residents, disappearing children, sexual assaults, etc., 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 etc. So would you agree with me that putting these people on boats or on barges, where the problem is going to be exacerbated tenfold, is totally and utterly out of the question?
Well, look, there are no easy answers. These are amongst the most difficult decisions within government. But I do think that placing asylum seekers on well-run, large sites with specific facilities provided, having minimal impact upon local communities, is the right approach. Taking hotels in a relatively ad hoc fashion in town centres, on high streets, is not the right way forwards. With respect to vessels such as barges or ferries, I do see merit in that. It is an approach that's been pursued in Scotland, but also, and in particular, I reference the Netherlands, which is using them effectively, and it does provide good value for money and decent accommodation.
Patrick Grady.
Madam Deputy Speaker. The Big Help Out app encourages people to volunteer for a good cause over the coronation weekend, and a number of opportunities listed on it, including with the British Red Cross, are with organisations that help refugees and asylum seekers. So does he think it's appropriate that people spend the coronation weekend supporting people who he says have broken into this country?
Well, he and I may disagree on the fundamental point here, but I believe in borders. I believe in national security and national sovereignty, and those people who choose to enter our country in flagrant abuse of our laws, who in many cases throw their documents into the Channel, those people are breaking the law, and it is right that we take action against them and, where possible, remove them from our country.
Marco Longhi.
Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may quickly welcome her back to the chair. It's been a while. Will the Minister agree with me that whilst the Government accelerates assessment, enforcement and removal, that it is quite right that we look at suitable and sustainable accommodation for illegal immigrants? And will he also agree with me, therefore, that if armed force bases are suitable for our brave, they are certainly suitable for illegal immigrants?
Well, he's right to say that there is a peculiarity on the left of politics, that they seem to be happy to house our brave armed forces personnel on these sites, but not to see illegal immigrants temporarily housed there whilst we process their claims. Of course, we will always be motivated by decency and legality. These sites will be well run and appropriate, but we mustn't allow a further pull factor to the UK to emerge.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Right Honourable Gentleman told the House a little earlier that the three sites which we presume are RAF Scampton, RAF Weathersfield and a site in East Sussex, perhaps he'd care to name it, will provide accommodation for several thousand. Could he tell the House how many thousand? And in doing so, could he remind us of the total number of people who are being placed in hotels currently?
Well, the number of individuals who will be housed on the sites will step up. Obviously, we want to ensure that the sites are well managed, and so initially there'll be smaller numbers, but within a very short period of time, there will be several thousand on those sites. I'm not going to give those details to the Right Honourable Gentleman now, because it's right that we engage with the local authorities and that they be the first to know the full details of our plans, but they will be a very significant addition to our capacity. The point he's making is that, in addition to that, there is a very large number of people currently accommodated in hotels. But this is the first step. This is the first step on the road to clearing those hotels and moving forwards. I would just say one further point, which is it's abundantly clear to me, having spent 4 months in this role now, there is no way in which I or the British government can build our way out of this issue. There are tens of thousands of people entering our country in an irregular manner every year. Of course, we have to get our own processes and management processes in place, but we've got to stop people coming here in the first place. That's why we're bringing forward the bill.
Maggie Throop.
And I welcome today's update and commend my right honourable friend for the efforts he's put in to get us to this stage. Further to the repeated assurance that I've previously received from the dispatch box from both my right honourable friend and the Prime Minister, will the Minister now commit to publishing a clear timetable for the closure of the 2 migrant hotels within touching distance of each other in Erewash in weeks, not months? And will he guarantee that this will be the end of their use for such purposes?
Well, I know that the Right Honourable Lady, my honourable friend, has been very tenacious in campaigning on behalf of her constituents, who, as I said in my statement, more broadly, are extremely concerned about the impact these hotels are having and the loss of amenity in terms of business and tourism and social events. It's for that reason that we're taking this difficult but correct decision to produce these sites, and I hope that we'll start to see hotels coming to a close in the months ahead, and I'd be delighted to work with her as we do so.
Tamanjeet Singh Dessi.
Thank you very much. Madam Deputy Speaker, the British taxpayer is shelling out over £6 million a day to house migrants, but asylum decisions have collapsed by 40% since 2015. And that is what is to blame for the chaos with hotels. And furthermore, a damning watchdog report found that the Home Office didn't have the financial information to even test whether those contracts were value for money, and they didn't even follow the correct procedure as was laid out. So, Minister, after 13 years, is there anything that this government can manage to do properly?
Well, we all know what state the last Labour government left the Home Office in. And we only have to refer, as I did the other day, to the report of John Vine, who was the inspector at the time, which painted a picture of complete chaos and dysfunction at the Home Office when the party opposite were last in power. It is important that we get the backlog down. And I hope you can see from what I've said today that I have put in place a robust plan and that we have a high degree of confidence that we will succeed in getting it down over the course of this year. But the real issue is the number of people crossing the channel, the people smugglers, the human traffickers. If we clear the backlog, if we make it even faster to process people's claims, that won't stop people. That's not going to stop the boats. That's a fantasy. Stopping the boats requires tougher measures than that, like those set out in the illegal migration bill.
Ed Timpson.
Deputy Speaker, are there any circumstances in which my right honourable friend would envisage children being placed in any of the sites that he's announced today? And to ensure that they can be moved into local authority care as swiftly as possible, could I encourage him to use the additional funding which is welcome and been announced for councils to cope with this accommodation, that they have an incentive to make sure that that is available to children as a priority?
It's not my intention to house minors on these sites. It's right that we ensure that minors and families are properly supported. These sites are going to be used for single adult males and will act as a serious deterrent to those people coming to this country.
Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. These proposals are highly reminiscent of the internment camps for refugees in the BBC series The Years and Years, which was on during lockdown. And if you didn't see it, Madam Deputy Speaker, it was really about the decline of modern Britain, and it ended with the election of a fascist populist Prime Minister. Ukrainian refugees in Scotland have been temporarily accommodated in high-quality former ferry accommodation at Leith Docks, which is adjacent to my constituency, and I've visited it, and I suggest if the Minister were to visit it, he would see it's extremely different from the industrial barges he's proposing, but those were temporary accommodations. Does he appreciate that if the UK government dumps refugees from other countries into the sort of poor quality accommodation that he's describing, the United Kingdom may face a claim of racial discrimination under Article 14 of the ECHR?
Well, I refer the Honourable Lady to the comments I made earlier. As we know, the Scottish Government did use ferries. I pass no criticism of the Scottish Government for their choice of doing so, and it appears to have worked relatively successfully in the circumstances. And so I think it is an option worthy of consideration. With respect to meeting our domestic and international law obligations, of course we intend to do so, and any accommodation that we bring forward will be decent and legal.
Natalie Elphick.
Madam Deputy Speaker. My Conservative-led Dover District Council has been working really hard to provide affordable and other housing for local people. Kent County Council likewise for local services. But that excellent work is put under immense pressure in having to deal with the sheer numbers and volume of migrants within Kent. This has been supported by the Labour Party, who don't want to stop the small boats and who care more about channel migrants than they do about the residents of Dover and Deal and Kent as a whole. In spite of the pressures on services and on schools, we are being asked to do more and take more. And today's announcement will not ease those pressures on Kent in that regard. Will my right honourable friend meet with me and Kent colleagues to see what more can be done to ease the pressures, the immense pressures that are faced in Kent and particularly in Dover and Deal?
Well, I'd be pleased to meet my honourable friend and her colleagues once again. I'm acutely aware of the pressures faced by Kent and by local authorities in Kent. And not only will this policy reduce the dependence upon hotels, it will ensure that significantly increased funding is made available to local authorities such as hers, so that can alleviate some of the burdens they're facing.
Ruth Cadbury.
Thank you,
Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister knows that while asylum seekers are living in often very difficult conditions in the hotels, a large proportion of taxpayers' funding isn't even going to the hotels or the food providers, but is hemorrhaging out into the pockets of a network of often dodgy contractors and subcontractors. What's he doing to address this mismanagement of government funds?
I now meet very regularly with exactly those firms, our Home Office providers, and she can be assured, in fact I think I've said this to her privately, that I have been very clear with those companies that they have a job to do. We need them to find suitable accommodation, but the accommodation must be good quality, must meet our contractual terms, and there must be value for money. They've been left in absolutely no doubt of my views, and if she or any other member of this House have concerns or criticisms, they should bring them to me, and I will ensure that they are heard.
Kelly Tolhurst.
Deputy Speaker, and it is nice to see you back in your place. I do thank my right honourable friend for the hard work that he has shown. He's shown me the strength of the work that he's been doing over the months that he's been in the role to try and tackle the problem, and I very much encourage his determination to stop the boats. I'm very pleased to see that we have had more enforcement work, and also that the funding for local authorities is coming forward. This is something that is very key for any local authorities that are dealing with asylum seekers. But I would like to just touch on the dispersal accommodation element, and really a plea that when the Home Office are making decisions around where to put dispersal accommodation, that where there are agencies who agree that a place is inappropriate, that the agencies who are put forward that information, the Home Office should really take note of that and look for alternative sites for those types of accommodation.
Well, my right honourable friend has been vociferous in raising legitimate concerns about one particular location in her constituency. She's right to say that there should be appropriate engagement between the local authority and the Home Office before any decisions are made, that the police and other stakeholders should be informed, and where there are serious concerns, of course, we shouldn't proceed with those properties.
Simon Malhotra.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister was right when he said we need to stop people coming here by boats. But last night, Labour voted for a cross-border police unit in the National Crime Agency to target criminal gangs smuggling people across the Channel. This is a measure that would make a huge difference in the short term and the long term to protecting our borders and the welfare of migrants. Why on earth did the government's MPs vote against it?
Because we've already done it.
Jane Stevenson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to pay tribute to my right honourable friend. I know him to be a compassionate, fair-minded minister, and he is having to take extremely difficult decisions in balancing helping people who are the most vulnerable and the interests of the people who elect us to represent them in this place, the UK taxpayer. Does he agree with me that the failure of parties opposite to recognise that during such a migration crisis there has to be a sensible limit on numbers, and the refusal to admit that resources are limited and UK taxpayers' money is limited makes them unfit for office?
Right. The Honourable Lady raised a very important and fundamental point, that of course we want the United Kingdom to be a generous and compassionate country that is renowned across the world for the way in which we treat those seeking sanctuary. But we also have to appreciate the finite resources that we have, and we have to deploy them in the most effective manner. And I feel profoundly that we're sent here not to grandstand or to virtue signal, but to put the well-being and interests of our own constituents first.
Clive Betts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister's made vague statements about all asylum seekers being moved out of hotels. He hasn't got a plan how to do it, has he? The only fallback, as the Security Minister, well, let's see it. The only fallback which the Security Minister announced yesterday is to pass responsibility back to local authorities. Did he see the response from the Local Government Association yesterday to that plan, where they said that most councils have got no social housing to offer? In most areas, the local housing allowance isn't sufficient to pay for the cost of accommodation. So what does he expect local authorities to do when thousands of asylum seekers are simply passed back to them from the hotels they're currently in?
Pity that the honourable gentleman always campaigns against the building of new homes. That might have been the easiest way to fix the housing crisis. But what we're going to do is work carefully and productively with local authorities to address this issue. That's always been my approach. When I was local government secretary, I engaged constantly, religiously with local authority leaders, and we're continuing to do so. What we're going to do is provide significantly enhanced resources to them so that we better meet the true costs of handling this difficult challenge.
Tom Hunt.
Speaker, clearly basic and cheap accommodation is far better than four-star hotels at the heart of communities to accommodate those who have illegally entered our country. The Minister will know how strongly I feel about the Nova Hotel in Ipswich, and also the fact that the vast majority of my constituents are against it. It's interesting that the Labour Party today have said they oppose use of hotel accommodation, because only recently we had a protest in favour of the use of a hotel, which was attended by the Labour parliamentary candidate and half the local Labour Party. So that's quite interesting. Will the Minister be able to give me some timescales with regards to when we can move out those who are currently in hotels into more appropriate accommodation? Because the sooner we get them out of a Nova Hotel, the better, and the more support he'll get from my constituents.
Well, I share his desire to close that hotel as soon as possible. I know how hard he's been representing his constituents in this regard. Today is the critical first step. Once we have these sites up and running, a combination of new arrivals and those currently in hotels will be moved on to the sites. The backlog clearance will of course free up places in hotels and enable us to close those. But the fundamental point is that the only sustainable answer is to stop the boats in the first place.
Stuart MacDonald.
Madam Speaker, can I ask what assessment the Department has made of the increased risk of self-harm and indeed suicide amongst vulnerable asylum seekers placed in precisely the type of institutional accommodation that he is advocating for today? Has a risk assessment been done of this policy, perhaps even one that MPs are allowed to see?
Hear, hear. Well, of course we take the well-being of the illegal immigrants, the residents of these new sites seriously. I think that they will be better cared for in this bespoke accommodation than in a network of ad hoc hotels taken in emergency circumstances. These sites will have well-trained individuals running them, they'll have their own healthcare facilities, and we'll be able to have Home Office personnel on site processing their claims swiftly, so they can either be granted asylum and remain in the UK, begin paying taxes, making a contribution to our country, or be removed.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his update and for his hard work in this area? Can my right honourable friend reassure this House that the treatment of women, children and families throughout this whole process will be compassionate, and that throughout the entire process that this Conservative government is committed to supporting and bolstering safe and legal routes to help vulnerable people fleeing persecution and seeking sanctuary?
Firstly, he has my total assurance that whilst this policy is tough, it will also be decent and legal, and he can see the work that I did in the autumn in the reforms to the Manston site in Kent as evidence of the way in which I will approach this. But to his second point, absolutely, this government believes in the UK being a world leader for resettlement schemes and safe and legal routes, which we are already. 500,000 people have come to our country for humanitarian purposes since 2015. That's something we should be proud of, and it's something that a Conservative government will continue.
Tim Farron.
Madam Deputy Speaker, he referenced and misquoted St Augustine of Hippo earlier on, who was from North Africa, and he would have put him in a camp as a consequence. He talked also in his statement about fundamentally altering our posture. I wonder if the Minister might consider altering his posture to being one of someone who is good at his job. Because in the end, what we have got is asylum seekers in hotels who do not want to be in hotels, but are in hotels and hostels. Why? Because of the colossal backlog that this government is responsible for. Rather than wasting money on this gimmick today, which clearly many of his backbenchers disagree with for a variety of different reasons, why does he not invest in making sure that those appeals are heard quickly, those hearings are done quickly, so people can either be given the right right to remain or be removed, as his government is failing to do. Would he agree with me that there is one thing worse than his and his government's incompetence on this issue, and it is the blaming of the consequences of that incompetence on the most vulnerable people in the world?
Well, I fundamentally disagree with the right honourable gentleman. Fault here lies with the people smugglers and the human traffickers. We should never blame ourselves in this country for the actions of organised immigration criminals. That is completely wrong. We are taking robust action to stop the boat, to arrest the trade, which is bringing tens of thousands of people illegally into our country and putting people's lives on the line every day. He doesn't want that. Of course he doesn't. That's why he should support our bill and help us to stop the boats.
Jack Burton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as the Minister knows, Stoke-on-Trent has contributed significantly to accommodating both asylum seekers and refugees, and the announcements today of additional funding for local areas will be very welcome to help cope with some of those pressures. But my constituents in Stoke-on-Trent want to know, will the Minister be prioritising emptying those hotels in Stoke-on-Trent?
That Stoke-on-Trent has stepped up and has provided a significant amount of accommodation, and that is creating challenges for the city. It's been my pleasure to work with him and the excellent leader of Stoke-on-Trent City Council. We want to ensure that hotels that are the most egregious cases are closed the first, and I think in particular of the North Staths Hotel in the centre of Stoke. That is exactly the sort of important business asset that I'd like to see closed swiftly.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the past few weeks, asylum seekers have been placed in hotels in my constituency that the Home Office then deemed unfit for occupation and dispersed them to undisclosed locations at no notice. Children have been taken out of school in the middle of exams, and last night, I'm told, asylum seekers were dumped outside a hotel in Shepherd's Bush and told to share rooms and beds with complete strangers. Is it the government's policy to punish and humiliate asylum seekers in these ways as a means of discouraging further migrants, even though, on past experience, the majority are likely to be granted status in the UK?
We will always treat people with decency and compassion, but it's also correct that we have to address the very significant pull factor to the United Kingdom. This is an approach being followed by most of our North European neighbours, like the Belgians, the Dutch, the Danes, the French and the Irish, because the pressures are so great. He doesn't want to stop the boats. He doesn't back our bill, or indeed any prior measures. We want to. We'll take the steps that are necessary.
Selene Saxby.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I take the opportunity to thank my right honourable friend for all of his work in this area, because I think most of us recognise this is a multifaceted problem and there is no silver bullet solution. Can I ask, does today's announcement mean that there will not be further requests by contractors to find hotel accommodation or similar, as I am aware of challenging conversations in my own constituency at this time? And where we are looking to empty hotels, we have a community that's very willing to welcome people into their homes, but might we look towards a scheme the same as we did when welcoming Ukrainian refugees, where there is additional ministerial resource, not disrespectful of his own experience in this matter, so that we can actually bridge that gap with the Levelling Up department, because we have a housing crisis of our own. We have thousands of our own population unable to secure accommodation, but we are keen to work to find a solution, and might there be an opportunity to sort of bridge the housing and the immigration situation?
Well, we are trying to work as closely as possible, the Home Office and the Department for Levelling Up. My honourable friend, the member for Kensington, is working closely with us on the operation of schemes like Homes for Ukraine, the Ukraine Family Scheme, the Afghan schemes, Syria and so on. That's very important. We also have officials who are working jointly between the two departments. So I hope that she will see that all of government is working closely together to address this complex, multifaceted challenge.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Minister has told us that newly arrived migrants are going to be taken to this new form of accommodation. So they are going to be competing for places with people he wants to move out of hotels. And it seems to me that he's planning for the failure of his illegal attempts through legislation to stop boats, because he is increasing the capacity of the spaces that he is planning. So can he tell us, in addition to those that are already accommodated by the Home Office, how many more people is he planning to accommodate?
Well, I'm confused by his question. He doesn't support the bill in the first place, but it is our intention that once we have secured the passage of our bill through Parliament, I thought the committee stage over the last 2 days showed the strength of support on this side of the House, not quite the same reaction on the other side, but we're going to bring forward the Rwanda proposal. Once that is operationalised, people will be detained, their cases will be heard in a limited fashion, and then they'll be removed from the country swiftly. In the meantime, we need some capacity, and that's going to be provided by these new large sites.
Mr. Raab.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend is one of the abler ministers in the Home Office, so it makes sense for him to give this statement this afternoon. Is he, though, as concerned as I am with a Gerald Ratner approach to the government's immigration policy, whereby it simply spends its time highlighting the problems rather than some of the work it is undertaking? Is he aware that the primary concern of most people is to ensure that the backlog of asylum applications is dealt with at a pace at which, and decisions more importantly, as they were in 2015? Could I also caution him that even worse than a Gerald Ratner approach to government policy on this is a something must seem to be done policy, which might bring forward this Rosie and Jim idea of barges all over the place?
My honourable friend raises an important point, that I think the public do not want to see performative or declaratory policies in this space. They want to see us acting, taking difficult decisions, and that is what is within this statement. He's also correct to say that this requires an approach across many different avenues, and he can see that again in the fact that we are rapidly reducing the backlog, that we've increased immigration enforcement visits by 50%, that we've established the small boats operational command in the Channel and are recruiting hundreds of officers to staff that we've signed deals with France, Albania. This shows the government acting on every approach. He can be in no doubt we will solve this problem, and if we fail, it will not be for want of trying.
Mr. Farry.
Thank you. The Minister talked about only meeting the basic needs of the residents. However, mental health to many people is a basic need. I don't see how isolation is going to help in that particular regard. Following on from that, can I invite the Minister to join me in condemning the racist protesters that are appearing outside hotels, including one in my own constituency, and in particular invite him to directly challenge the tropes that are being used that asylum seekers are sexual predators, the same tactic that has been used down through the centuries to attack marginalised people?
It's been very clear that those far-right and other elements who are inciting violence and intimidation outside hotels or other forms of accommodation are wrong. I have directed the Home Office to work closely with the police through the National Police Coordination Centre and other parts of government, including the security services, to track that pernicious activity and to support local councils and police forces in taking robust action wherever possible. If he has a particular case he wants to bring to my attention, I'll be pleased to look into them.
Jackie Doyle-Price.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Could I just probe my honourable friend with regard to his proposals for housing migrants in barges and ferries? And specifically, could he just advise whether he expects those vessels to be to have access to the quay or moored offshore? And if they are to have access to the quay, which I would expect, what conversations he's had with port operators about the operational challenges to their business for hosting what is essentially a residential community long term?
Well, my honourable friend will forgive me. I'm not going to comment on press speculation. I will obviously make further statements should we proceed with any significant developments in this regard. I have pointed to examples in Scotland and in the Netherlands where the use of vessels has been successful. We don't, as she knows, currently have the powers to detain individuals for prolonged periods of time, and so any form of accommodation would be non-detained.
Paul Blomfield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In response to an earlier question, the Minister talked about people breaking into our country. The Home Secretary has talked about an invasion. Words which, I guess, like this statement, are designed for the headlines. But can I ask him quite genuinely whether he doesn't recognise that this sort of language to describe people, many of whom are seeking refuge from countries like Afghanistan, Iran and Syria, whether such language is inflammatory, divisive, adding to the sort of tensions other members have talked about, and whether he wouldn't reflect on his use of language and agree that the priority is to tackle the people smugglers, not criminalise and demonise their victims.
Well, I believe that all of us have a responsibility to choose our words with care and to accept the occasions where we choose the wrong language. This is an area of public policy which it would be better to de-escalate the current language and tensions. I don't think that it's wrong to describe individuals as illegal immigrants or to say that individuals are breaking into our country, because we have borders and they have to be enforced. If you or I crossed a national border into another country, you would expect to be met by law enforcement and a robust response.
Mark Jenkinson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I pay tribute to the work of my right honourable friend on this matter and that of the Home Secretary and the former Home Secretary? The diligence and cooperation of each of them with me has been welcome over the last 12 months. Last summer I successfully managed to stop the introduction of a hotel in my constituency of Workington in a wholly unsuitable place, although it fell on me, unfortunately, to prove to the Home Office that it was wholly unsuitable. The threat of additional hotels, not only of hotels, but of companies like Serco hoovering up family homes while we have a housing waiting list in my constituency, remains. Can my right honourable friend set out to me what today's announcement means for that threat and when we can safely say that threat might have been removed?
Well, first, I thank him for his generous words towards me and my colleagues at the Home Office. He's right to say that the sheer number of people crossing the Channel illegally, coupled with the generosity of our country in recent years in welcoming in 500,000 people on humanitarian grounds, and the high levels of legal migration we have, are posing a very serious challenge to communities and councils with respect to housing and social housing. We're working with the Department for Levelling Up through those challenges, and one additional element that we're introducing today is a substantially enhanced package for local authorities so they have more funding to pay for the kinds of accommodation that they'll need and any displacement activity that might occur.
Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Rather than treat those seeking sanctuary in these shores as criminals and waste vast sums of money to build internment camps to house them, wouldn't it be more sensible simply to issue them with temporary work permits so that they can contribute to the community, earn their own money to cover their own housing costs and pay tax into the exchequer rather than being a drain upon it?
Exactly. Hear, hear. I understand and acknowledge that that's a legitimate point of view. It's not one that I agree with, because I believe that we have to suffuse our approach with deterrence, and if we allow a further pull factor to the United Kingdom in the form of enabling people to work soon after their arrival, I suspect we will just find even more people coming to this country.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I want to first of all thank my right honourable friend the Minister for his engagement, which has been quite robust between us at times, because he'll understand that in Stoke-on-Trent, where we have around 1,300 asylum seekers and illegal economic migrants, of which 31% are in hotels, residents and constituents are outraged to see the city used and abused in this way. And he wholly and accurately reflects the North Stafford Hotel, right by a Levelling Up project, right by a £40 million Transforming Cities Fund, right opposite our railway station, which is a gateway to 6 million visitors a year, as being wholly unacceptable. So to seek reconfirmation, Mr Deputy Speaker, from my own friend, who in answer to my friend and neighbour in Stoke-on-Trent South, that Stoke-on-Trent will be one of those priority areas that will see these young single men moved out of hotels into the new accommodation he has outlined today.
Well, as my honourable friend knows, I love the potteries and will always want to further the best interests of Stoke-on-Trent and its wider region. The hotel by the station is a particularly egregious one, in my opinion, because it is holding back regeneration in that part of the city, and I would like to see it closed at the earliest opportunity. The other point I'd make with regard to Stoke-on-Trent is that it has stepped up and taken a very large number of individuals through dispersal accommodation, which I hope other local authorities will do with the added support we're providing today.
Simon Lightwood.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Yesterday, Labour offered a reasonable amendment to the illegal migration bill, which would have forced the Home Office to consult with councils over asylum hotels. That would have been welcome in my constituency, where, despite the Minister's announcements, it's planning to force a third hotel on my community. Wakefield Council has already had £300 million cut from its budget and has done its best to provide support, but it lacks the community capacity and, yes, the funding to do more. So why did the government run scared last night and vote down our amendment to give local councils a say?
Well, he should go back to his constituents and explain why, in his short tenure in this House, he has already started voting against exactly the kind of measures which would stop the boats. I rather suspect that he's not on the same side as his constituents on this issue.
Foster.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It has to be said, today's statement is one that, I can understand the Minister's trepidation in coming into the dispatch box, having had to do similar statements myself over the years. But it is the right approach that he's outlining today. We can see comparisons, particularly on continental Europe, particularly in Greece, where large-scale accommodation centres have been used as part of a transformation of their asylum system, providing humane and decent accommodation, whilst also actually assisting with the process of making decisions. Now, in terms of dealing with some of the issues we've had thrown at this one, I'm assuming he will view this as a part of national infrastructure and therefore take that through that planning process. And the second part of this, I also presume this is all, as he's touched on already, non-detained accommodation. And then finally, what sort of timeline is he looking to actually get some of these centres up and running? Because people will only really see this making a difference when they see hotels closing down in their local area.
Well, my honourable friend knows how difficult these decisions can be. And like him, as my predecessor, I didn't come into politics to deal with clandestine entry or organised immigration crime, but I did go into politics to provide security and stability to the public and to put the interests of my constituents above those of anyone else. And that's why we're taking these decisions in the national interest. We will ensure these sites are non-detained, they're legally compliant, they'll be provided at pace. We will make use of the planning powers that the government has at its disposal, and I'm confident that we will be able to get individuals on these sites in the coming weeks.
Tahir Ali.
Mr Deputy Speaker, 13 years of Tory mismanagement, asylum system in crisis, backlogs out of control, claims not being decided for years on end. This statement does nothing but bring a scaremongering and headline grabbing just before the local elections. A member of his own party summarised this statement quite correctly as politics of trying to do something. Politics of trying to do something. Will he agree with me that this statement, which is no more than headline-grabbing scaremongering, does very little to target human traffickers and the illegal grants, but rather it makes illegal traffickers the heroes, whilst the victims are the real targets in this?
Well, it sounds like better than the politics of doing nothing, which is what the opposition is proposing. We are taking action to tackle the people smugglers and the human traffickers, and I don't doubt the motivations of the honourable gentleman, but let me say this. I see these people and the work that they do every day in this job. They are some of the most evil, the most pernicious people in society. You have to match them. You cannot behave in a way which is weak and naive. You have to respond. You have to respond with tough policies, and that's what we're doing here. We will not allow the UK to be a soft touch, and by ensuring that we now have this new form of accommodation, not only will we clear the hotels, but we'll also ensure that there isn't a pull factor to the UK.
Mr Baines.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome my right honourable friend's statement this afternoon, and I'd also like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the right honourable lady, the member for Witham, for her excellent work as Home Secretary previously. Could my right honourable friend comment in more detail on the similar approach that's been taken to asylum accommodation by Belgium, Ireland, France, Germany, and it would seem by the Scottish Government as well?
It is true, as I've said on a number of occasions, that our Northern European neighbours are looking to take similar robust approaches. In Ireland, they are considering bailing individuals to no fixed abode with vouchers to pay for their immediate needs, as I understand it. In Belgium, they have seen tented communities arise and are using hostels akin to homeless shelters. The Danes have, I think, publicly said that my right honourable friend's policy with respect to Rwanda is an interesting and valuable one which they are looking on with interest. And so we're not alone, we're not unique, we're working together because there is a European migration crisis and we have to take serious and robust decisions, make difficult choices, or I'm afraid the UK will be very exposed.
Jim Shannon.
Mr Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister for his statement today? The Minister knows there is a difference between economic migrants who are abusing the system and are fit and independent and whose circumstances have dictated the final report. But alongside there are those who are asylum seekers, many fleeing religious persecution, be it women, children, families who need help urgently. So can I ask the Minister this question? Will he make it abundantly clear that those who come here illegally due to extenuating circumstances will have scope for compassion in their treatment?
Well, we want to ensure that human dignity is at the heart of the system that we are creating. And that's why the UK has a fantastic record in recent years for resettlement schemes of the kind that I know that the Honourable Gentleman is a champion, like those from Ukraine, Hong Kong, Syria, Afghanistan. And by bringing an end to illegal migration across the Channel, or reducing it as far as one can, we can deploy our finite resources as a country to help those people who need it the most, those people who are in conflict zones, the victims of religious persecution that he cares passionately about, rather than those people who are predominantly young men who are fit, able and in a safe place like France.
Can I thank, in a moment, can I thank the Minister for his statement in responding to questions for well over an hour, but could I just ask him to remain seated for the first point of order, which I think directly relates to something that he may have said. So, Mr Betts.
Point of order. With regard to the Minister's response to the question I asked him, where he said, I'd always opposed house building. I think the Minister knows, in this House, as Chair of the Select Committee as well as individually, I've argued very strongly for more house building, including hitting the 300,000 target. Only this week I've been working with officers in Sheffield to try and get away a scheme to build 800 homes at a Wardside in my constituency. I've worked on it for many years. I've known in the past the Minister to be a fair and reasonable man, even when I've disagreed with him. Wouldn't he on reflection accept that what he said was unfair and inaccurate, and maybe like to correct the record?
Mr Deputy Speaker, I've worked alongside the Honourable Gentleman for some time and know him to be an excellent chair of the Select Committee, so I mean him no disrespect. He and I did disagree on reforms of the planning system, including building more homes in Sheffield, but I know that he is a champion of good quality housing and increasing the quantity of it across the country.
Thank you very much. Point of order. Gill.
On a point of order, Mr Deputy Speaker, could you please advise on the member for Harrow East description of protesters outside the Indian High Commission as terrorists during business questions last week? We condemn the violent behaviour outside India House. Violence is never acceptable. However, language is important, and to describe protesters as terrorists is inappropriate, many of whom would have been justifiably concerned about what was happening in Punjab and how to contact their families while mobile internet and SMS were shut down. Sikhs and Hindus have lived peacefully alongside one another in the United Kingdom for decades. And the current situation in Punjab does not require this kind of inflammatory language. As members, we need to set an example. Can I ask that the member correct the record?
I'd like to thank the honourable member for her point of order and forward notice of it. I assume that she has informed the member involved. Good. Members have freedom of speech in this chamber, and they are responsible for their comments, not the chair. That said, Mr. Speaker has repeatedly reminded the House of the need for good temper and moderation, as Erskine May puts it. I would encourage all members to follow that advice, particularly on sensitive issues. Thank you very much. Point of order, Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. On a point of order, I wrote to the Home Secretary on 15th of March in my capacity as Chair of the Joint Committee on Human Rights to invite her to appear before the Joint Committee on Human Rights as part of our inquiry into the illegal migration bill. On the face of that bill, the Home Secretary has made a declaration required under Section 19 of the Human Rights Act that she is unable to certify that the provisions of the bill are compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. The committee has asked the Home Secretary to give evidence to us on the human rights consequences of her legislation and to interrogate the legal arguments put forward in the ECHR memo that accompanied the bill. Given the pace with which the bill is passing through Parliament, we asked her to respond by 22nd of March. Mr Deputy Speaker, it's now 29th March, and we've today heard that she will not be available to attend, despite us giving her more than one date. But they are considering whether the Minister is available instead. I wonder, Mr Deputy Speaker, can you assist me on advising me on what steps are available to my committee to ensure that we can carry out what's going to be really the only committee carrying out effective scrutiny and legislative scrutiny of the government's proposals in the illegal migration bill by hearing from the very person whose name appears on the Section 19 statement saying that the bill doesn't comply with the European Convention on Human Rights and indeed the Human Rights Act.
To the honourable member for her forward notice of the point of order she has just given. Mr Speaker has made it repeatedly clear that it's very important that committees have access to the relevant witnesses, and that, of course, includes ministers. Therefore, I very much hope that the Treasury bench will have heard this exchange and that a minister will be able to give evidence to the committee as soon as is possible. Presentation of bills. Secretary Michael Gove.
Non-domestic rating bill.
Second reading what day? Tomorrow. Presentation of bill. Secretary Dominic Raab.
Victims and Prisoners Bill.
Second reading what day?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Presentation of bill. Helen Morgan.
Elections Voter Identification Requirements Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 24th of November.
Friday the 24th of November. Presentation of bill. David Johnston.
Local Electricity Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 24th of November.
Friday the 24th of November. We're now coming to the 10-minute rule motion on cooperatives' permanent shares, and I call Gareth Thomas to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to enable cooperatives to issue permanent shares and for connected purposes. Permanent mutual shares are the rocket fuel that would help the co-op and mutual movement double in size, an ambition which the co-op party, and I'm pleased to say the Labour Party now, have long sought. They would offer to housing associations, agricultural cooperatives, employee-owned businesses and mutual insurers a source of venture capital that crucially would not require them to demutualise, end their British ownership or scrap their democratic governance. The independent mutual think tank Mutuo has suggested that a government ambitious for British business to succeed and grow could help the sector raise some £13 billion over 5 years using permanent mutual shares. Such investment has the potential to be galvanising for individual co-op businesses and mutuals. For Liverpool Victoria, had this option been available, there would have been no need to consider demutualisation and selling up to the controversial private equity giant Bain Capital. The challenges too facing John Lewis now only underline the limited capital raising options facing successful, sustainable co-op and mutual businesses who need to finance expansion and investment plans but who do not want to give up their control by British customers or employees. Permanent mutual shares provide an opportunity to create a genuine marriage between what is known as patient capital and co-op and mutual organisations rooted in their communities, looking for the finance to tackle long-term environmental, economic and social challenges. Patient capital is that part of the private equity world, such as some pension funds, which are willing to invest for the long term and are not focused on securing ownership or part ownership of a business. The investment raised by permanent mutual shares does not have to be paid back. The value of the investment is maintained by allowing the shares to be traded. As with any shares, the investor will hope for a dividend, but takes a calculated risk. There would no doubt be considerable discussions before such investment was made into the co-op or mutual business, and in that it's similar to the debt finance that businesses can access to varying degrees now. Agricultural cooperatives could also benefit. I'm particularly grateful for the interest and insights of the Scottish Agricultural Organisation Society. Agricultural cooperatives could benefit through this device, offering them new opportunities to invest in the best of British farming and fishing produce, as well as in our shared environmental futures. Retail co-ops operating in highly challenging markets can be hamstrung by the lack of access to capital, needing constant investment to drive year-on-year growth. This slight change in the law could, according to Mutuo, galvanise over £1.2 billion to drive investment in businesses in every region of the UK. Housing associations, Mr Deputy Speaker, face major costs over the coming years to tackle mould, improve on building safety and to meet environmental standards. Many housing associations have already raised significant debt capital. So permanent mutual shares offer routes to raise further transformational levels of investment to build social and genuinely affordable housing. Again, the independent think tank Mutuo has suggested that with sustained and shrewd leadership, up to £10 billion could be raised to meet Britain's housing challenges, financing between potentially 60,000 and 90,000 new homes. Ministers opposite, and I say this gently, have known for some time that these types of shares could make an enormous difference to great British co-op and mutual businesses. There have been 2 private members' bills that have proposed this solution. 100 members of Parliament wrote to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, now Prime Minister, in the wake of the Liverpool-Victoria attempted demutualisation, referencing the need to offer this capital-raising solution. And since 2015, mutual insurers and friendly societies have been waiting for the Mutuals Deferred Shared Act to bring permanent mutual shares into effect for friendly societies. So ministers and officials know what needs doing in this space, but have you not yet demonstrated the political will to back these great British businesses and level up the playing field with their overseas and domestic rivals? I should point out to the House that there is no financial cost to the British taxpayer from this proposal. In the UK,